So it seems like we're kind of caught in the middle of a little gamesmanship here, to put it nicely. Okay, moving on. Transportation projects, those bills are moving. Uh, let's see, they passed one on each side. That gives FDOT the authority to do the progressive design build, which is doesn't apply to a lot of projects. It has to be 250 million or more. And I don't know if JW is on the call, but he's been in contact with folks over there at DOT a lot, and it's pretty much aimed at the project that's coming in Tampa. I guess it's the West Shore interchange. So, which I think is the estimated costs on that are like over $1 billion. But everyone that I talked to on our transportation committee and our leadership team supports that bill.
Hey, Alan, if I can jump on that one, just kind of for the record's sake, just want to make you all aware that the ports, the airports, and the Transit Association combined spoke with the Senate sponsor, Senator Hooper, to raise concerns about the cap. Senator Hooper was listening ears to the conversation. There was no commitment really made to make any changes to it. If the bill gets agenda, I think that group will convene with him as well, again, and kind of further that conversation. But again, the airports, the seaports, and the Transit Association have all expressed concerns about that cap.
Right. And that was a separate bill last year. For those that don't know, what it does is current law says at least 15% of the annual revenue for the transportation fund must go to seaports, airports, and whatnot. They add in there this year in this bill that it would be capped at 25%, so at least 15, but no more than 25. Last year, when Doug was ED of the seaports, he was on that right away and had called us and let us know. I'm glad you said that, Derek, because they really haven't made any noise at all this year. I've told our committee our group that language is in there, and we do oppose that language. So if we can help there, let me know.
Absolutely. And I'll also tell you, and I just thought about this too, there was conversation by those three groups with DOT as well. The report that got back from DOT was the secretary also had some concern that he was going to express to the House sponsor. Andrade told those groups if he heard from DOT that he would be willing to make changes to that. And so we'll see what happens once the bill gets agenda. But DOT was going to speak with the House sponsor and make him aware of their concerns.
All right, good. All right, the next two, I put that up here because it's just important to our members. It's the professional structural engineer license. It has not moved on either side. It's had trouble for several years, but I think there's a ray of hope on that. I know the Senate sponsor was spoken to and indicated, that he's ready to go. He had gotten it through a couple of committees last year in the Senate, and because there was no movement in the House and that wasn't going to move, he just let it go at that point. But he's ready to go and feels like they could get it done in the House. And there's some chat going on over in the House with officials over there who have indicated they don't really like it, but if it comes up, they won't do much to oppose it. So there is a ray of hope here for that. I'll go back to that in a minute because it kind of plays into something we'll be talking about here in just a minute. These others, Laura, you can just kind of scroll down. The acquisition of professional services, those have not been heard. Our CLGR has taken the position of oppose those bills. The municipal water and sewer utility rates is in the same position, has not been heard on either side. We remain opposed. As for the infrastructure project funding, as it deals with transfers of utility revenues where they would lose state funding if they use utility revenues to support general government services. So those haven't moved. We're still watching them and keeping an eye out for them. But we'll just see how things develop here in the coming weeks. Seems weird. We're only in the second week, but if you don't get your stuff up in the second week, you start worrying. And I know I do. If I'm pushing a bill and it hadn't been up yet, it's not a done deal yet. Don't get me wrong, but as you get into session further and further, it becomes harder and harder to get those things moving in committee and having the time to get them through all of the committees. A couple of bills we're going to take off of this report. The fuel sales tax, which would remove the annual indexing, did not get a Senate sponsor, so we're going to take that off the report. Same with the purchase of plant materials for construction projects, which, Derek, if you will remember, that language about the plants was on the same bill with the cap for the seaports and the airports. So they had split it up this year for some reason, but at least that part of it's dead, and we'll continue to work on the other issue. Which brings me then to this, and this is one of the reasons why I canceled the call last week, and I apologize for that. It was last minute. I appreciate Laura getting on and chatting with our members that did join, but we had our PE days last week, which ended on Thursday, and the bill filing deadline was Tuesday, but up until the point where the legislative session started. We knew we had several bills out there to deal with the Surfside issue, and we just hadn't had time to go through them. So I didn't really have anything new for you at this time last week, but I do now. Senate Bill 1702 by Senator Bradley is mandatory building inspections. This bill is actually in committee on Tuesday, which is good because those of you that are aware, we released our recommendations on what should be done. And this bill tracks about 90% of what we had recommended to the legislature. It's got a couple of differences. The big one being this bill calls for the inspectors that do the engineers that do the phase 2 inspection, if required, would have to be special inspectors for threshold buildings. And they just, they're a very important part of the puzzle, but that's not necessarily what they do. They're there for the initial construction. They can see everything. And, we've got a whole lot of structural engineers out there that inspect existing buildings that, may or may not be certified as special inspectors for threshold buildings. So really limits the number of people that would be able to do this work. And we probably don't have enough to begin with. So that's a big one. Some folks talked to her last week, and she seemed willing to change that or to at least talk about that. So we will get with her and work on that. But the good side of this is that we know in the House there's a bill that's going to come from a committee, Representative Perez's committee, which hopefully is going to be the companion bill for 1702. That's so far Bradley's is the only one that's been filed by a Republican. The other two are from Democrats. Although I would say those two Democrats are the representatives for the district where the Surfside building resided. So they may have some play in here. So I'm not totally discounting them, but I don't see a Republican legislature letting an issue like this go flying under the flag of a Democratic legislator. So I think 1702 is the big one. It came up and it's already been put on a committee. So to me, that sort of indicates this is the way the Senate, is going to go if they've made a decision to take it all the way. So we'll be working on that. And Derek and I have a call here at 11 o'clock with a lobbyist that represents building management companies. They have some concerns. I don't think any of them are serious concerns that's going to affect the bill. As a matter of fact, on one of them, I think our members may even agree. So we also have the work group that was put together that consisted of multiple associations. That group is going to meet on Monday. We already had that plan because of all of these bills coming out, and they were very important, these other groups, in putting together these recommendations. So we want them at the table as we move forward. But we'll be meeting Monday morning at 10 to go through these and really kind of go through it. But the big part is to get it out of committee on Tuesday. And get it moving. We've got other stops that we can make changes, and so the key point is to get the bill moving.
Ellen, you have a couple of questions.
Sure, go ahead.
And Nelson.
I'm sorry, Carlos, do you have a question?
No, Alan, I think that Nelson, and I saw Angelina's hand go up. I don't know if that's.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't see everybody on here. Sure, if you have a question, Angelina, go. I'll let you go first.
I lowered mine. I was going to bring up the working groups meeting on Monday, but you already did.
Okay.
And Nelson.
Yes. So I heard you mention something about the threshold inspection in the building license and the PE license. I don't know if, and I don't know, this is my first time on this call, by the way, Assistant Director of Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Engineering and Construction. I don't know if all you folks are from Miami or if this is across the state, but here in Miami, we actually had a resolution presented to the Board of County Commission requiring exactly that, but for a 35-year inspection. So I'm just curious if you guys are aware of that. I guess what I heard you say is that it's not going to pass in the state level, but it's moving forward in Miami, apparently. And my understanding is we could be more prescriptive than the state unless we're preemptive.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question. So the proposal in Miami-Dade is for special inspectors for threshold buildings to do these inspections?
So the proposal is for, I have it open right now. It's basically, what it says is that it's a resolution to provide a written report for all county-owned buildings that are 35 years or older, right? And the report will come from, let me put control fine. The report will have to be done by a Florida professional engineer and a Florida threshold building inspector. Well, and there's other requirements. There's electrical requirements.
It brings up an interesting point, and this is what I meant when I was talking about the professional structural engineer's license.
It doesn't say that. It says just professional engineer.
Right. But I'm talking about the bill that would create a professional structural engineer's license. Right now, one of the issues we have when we're looking at these bills is, they all call for a structural engineer in some way. And some of them just say structural engineer and don't really put any limitations on it. Our recommendations was actually for structural engineer that has at least 10 years of design experience and 5 years of inspection experience. Problem there being, you keep limiting the number of engineers that can do it. It becomes very difficult to get all of these buildings done. As far as the numbers on the 30 years and 20 years, we wrestled with that quite a bit throughout the work groups meetings, and we were meeting twice a week for several months there to get our recommendations together. I don't think, that we think 30 years for buildings that are more than 3 miles from the coast and 20 miles or 20 years for buildings that are within 3 miles of the coast, was the minimum of what should be done. That's what the members of this work group came to. So, one of the bills below, actually is every 5 years. I think one of them actually requires an annual inspection. So people are kind of all over the board. And I think our thought there was, I don't know that we're tied to the 30 and 20. We just kind of said, that's the minimum of what we think. That's what we'd really like to see in the end is for there to be statewide, uniformity in what that is. And
it
so
was just more of an FYI on my part.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm not trying to debate with you. I'm just kind of explaining where we were coming from on this. So I think there's going to be a lot of negotiation on this bill. And because there's a lot of things even that we didn't address. We didn't address things like how much reserve should be held and, those types of
Right,
issues.
totally.
We felt like we'd leave that to others, but we were just approaching it from the structural side of it. But the problem is in the if you use the term structural engineer, there really isn't a definition in the statutes for what a structural engineer is. We have professional engineer and we have the special inspector for threshold buildings, but you get to outside of that and there's no real clear definitions, which is why I think a lot of people are going back to this the special inspector idea, because it's clearly defined in the statutes. So that's an issue that, we're going to have to work through as we go along on this as well. So
You because actually last night Miami Beach just passed an annual inspection report, well, not an annual inspection, but an annual report submittal for any structural modifications you make to their to buildings in Miami Beach, right? And that's annually. But do you foresee the state preempting, local municipalities?
no, it's our hope. It's our hope that we put in, a reasonable statewide standard and allow the local communities to adopt their own.
So you don't foresee them preempting
as long
from
as
getting
it's right, as long as it's not weaker than what's at the state level, be kind of like some of the things that can be done with the building code. As long as it makes the rule stronger. I think, and I think our group thought that local government should be able to do that.
Okay.
I think our goal here is just to kind of set a standard at the state level, because if we just left it to the locals, we'd have a bunch of them that wouldn't do anything. So we think if we're going to get these buildings identified and repaired, that there's got to be a statute at the state level to address it.
Okay, understood.
No, I appreciate the comments. Okay, so Laura, if you'll scroll on down, I'll go through these pretty quick. I just mentioned, I don't know, how much juice these are going to get. For instance, like ours covers all buildings. It's not just condos and residential type buildings. It's any building, that meets our criteria, whether it's an office building or, whatever it may be. So that's something we'll be working on, because a lot of them are going with this at least 4 stories, which kind of lines up again with the threshold building idea. This one though, stay with that one, Laura. The one before, it's 1780. There you go. This one only applies to buildings within a half mile of the coast, when they reach 30 years of age, and then every 5 years thereafter. So there's no requirements for buildings that are greater than a half mile from the coast, which I don't really understand that. But Senator Pizzo, knows these issues. Again, it's his district where Surfside is. His family was also in the condo business. He himself is an attorney, but he had told me at one point that his father, his grandfather's company had been responsible for 150,000 units. And so he's familiar, with the issue and with the industry. So we'll talk to him, but that doesn't make sense, because to me, if a building gets old enough, whether it's 5 miles from the coast or 50 feet from the coast, there could be problems, and the state has an interest in making sure those buildings are identified and repaired. He also sets up providing to the local building official. And then 21 days, they need a repair plan, but that's probably a little unrealistic. But we'll see how that develops. 1391 is the house companion for that. They are identical at this point. Again, neither one of them's been heard or scheduled to be heard. So Laura, if you scroll on down, this 1942 requires an annual inspection by a structural engineer. Again, the term structural engineer isn't defined. And then it gets into a little building code, waterproofing issue, prohibits waiving or reducing reserve funds. And, one thing there is, I think a lot of us feel as though, you shouldn't be able to waive those reserve funds. They need to be there so that when the building needs to be repaired. The term reducing reserve funds is interesting, because that's almost exactly verbatim the way it's said in this bill. And wouldn't you be reducing your reserve funds if you use them to repair the building? And it seems like the way the statute or the way this bill is written, it would prevent that from happening. And then they have some education requirements for elected or appointed board members, which was a little different. I hadn't heard that discussed before. So at some point, I think, a lot of these things are going to kind of merge in. Again, the Florida Bar Association has their own set of recommendations. The grand jury down in Miami-Dade had recommendations. So I think all of those will be considered, and, there'll be a package put together at the end. We just have to be careful. This is a big issue. There's a lot of players, a lot of stakeholders, and when you try to rush something, obviously we'd like to see something happen this year, but when you try to rush it, you can make mistakes and you get all those unintended consequences. So that's why we're reforming or getting this work group of ours back together, and we'll be working with these other groups to see what we can craft and get done by the end of this session. Any questions on that? Okay, these last two, I think they're the last two. Those were already there. These would just basically turn it over to the Florida Building Commission to develop, standards for maintenance and inspections of existing buildings. In our recommendations, that was kind of the end goal of the whole thing, was for it to finally wind up there. And I know the International Code Council has put some things together about, inspections of existing buildings, but nothing's been adopted into the Florida Building Code. This just kind of goes straight there. But, it would be at least, near the end of 2023 before the next version of the code comes out. If they don't have it ready by then, you'd be looking at 2026. So, we think there needs to be something there from the state, in the interim. So that's why we have monitor there. We're not exactly for them or against them. We're just watching to see if those move. Neither one of them has been heard yet either. So do we have any questions?
Alan, just a comment. This is Carlos. The House is going to, I mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned, I don't think you did, but it's going to go through Danny Perez for their version of the Senate bill that we were just discussing. Mm-hmm. And that should come up through one committee and one committee only, and it would be the one that he chairs. So we need to look out for that one as well.
Yeah, I did mention it because I said I hope that that's the companion bill to the Senate bill that we have, 1702, but we're still not quite sure exactly what Representative Perez wants to have in it. So we're trying to nail that down. I'm hopeful, that it's going to be similar to Senator Bradley's, and we'll have, 2 bills that we can work with and, get them vetted and hopefully get them out of session this year.
Good. Thank you. Good job.
All right. Anybody else? Well, we're trying to get through. I think what was the Senate down 6 members yesterday, Derek? If I counted right.
That's true.
That's about 15% of the Senate that's not here right now, but everybody's struggling. But progress is being made. If there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and we'll call this one over. But please raise your hands if you have a question. Seeing none, I thank everybody. We'll do it again next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.